I'm going to give a presentation soon, but I took the opportunity to inform you very briefly about a new possible meeting place next year. The European Inland Fishery and Aquaculture Advisory Commission is hosting a conference or a symposium in Norway next year about recreational fisheries. The overall title of the conference is Managing Freshwater Recreational Fisheries in an Era of Change. Even if it says freshwater, I hope, or it's up to those who are interested, it could also take up issues related to marine recreational fisheries, I'm sure. I am asked to share the conference, and I'm already in charge of putting up a program. It will be in Lillehammer in Norway, and the dates are 15th to 17th of June 2012. Even if it's a European conference, those of you from North America, Canada and USA, the IFAC meetings very often have attendance and presentations from you. The themes that we have listed are dynamics of recreational fisheries, how and why recreational fishing is important, a theme we talked a lot about yesterday, and management challenges in freshwater recreational fisheries. I'm sure there will be many presentations on topics like catch and release, harvest regulations, and other issues that we have talked about. The venue will be a large conference hotel in Lillehammer, the headquarters for the Olympics in 1994. We have a website that is not yet on air, but it will be on air in a week or two, and I'll probably also use the email addresses from this conference to promote the conference after the summer when more content is coming up. I'm pretty sure that we will open up for proposals on sessions. If some of you want to organize a specific session, there will be an early deadline this autumn for sessions, and then a regular deadline for submitting abstracts somewhat later. So I hope to see many of you there, and hopefully try to create something that attracts many of people and institutions interested in recreational fishing. Okay. Then I'm going to talk about my main topic, recreational fishing for Atlantic salmon, and the emerging trend of catch and release. You've heard about this partly sometimes already. I'm going to look a little bit more into it, and especially look at some of the interesting country differences that we see on this matter, and eventually discuss or speculate a little bit about the reasons for these differences. On the front page here is actually a Finn, my former PhD student Elina Halpen, who works out of the University of Tromsø. I'm continuing with the Finns. This is an excerpt from a regional major newspaper in Trondheim in Norway a couple of years back. It says, Finnish angler gave freedom to this trophy salmon, 40 pound. It was sort of very unusual. Especially, I don't know if it was unusual because it was a Finn. Anyhow, you know, on the websites of the newspapers you can comment under, and there were comments there who illustrate some of these are different ethical points of view that you talked about earlier. Someone say that you shouldn't play with your foot, and other offered him a bottle of cognac for releasing the fish. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about what are the sort of the trends for catch and release in salmon angling around the North Atlantic. I'm interested in why catch and release is growing, and some places growing extremely fast, almost from one year to another. I'm also going to maybe be a little bit critical about how many you catch and release, especially compared to other sort of conservation challenges we have in salmon conservation and management around the North Atlantic. I don't have the very most recent statistics here, but from the ICES working group on North Atlantic salmon, you now can find the statistics for catch and release on Atlantic salmon. And, in 2008, more than 200,000 salmon were released, most in UK, Canada, and Russia. Since then, I'm sure that number has increased somewhat, at least. The percentage has probably increased more than the number of fish released because the stocks are going down. If we look at the different countries, the figures are like this, with Canada and Scotland being the countries with the highest number of salmon being released, and Russia as a good number 3 here. My country, Norway, is far down the list, and if we took out the percentages, that would be extremely low for Norway. I have another slide on that here, showing that, for instance, in the US, you are obliged to release all Atlantic salmon in the northeast states to the very few individuals you have left. You can almost count them on one hand, I think. We can see that Russia, and I'm sorry about the Norwegian names here in the countries, but you can probably figure it out. Russia in yellow here, and Canada has been relatively stable in this time period that are listed here, but we have some very interesting trends coming out very clearly here for England and Scotland, that where catch and release in salmon angling was very uncommon. If we only go back to the late 1980s, then something really dramatic happened in the middle of the 1990s, where it suddenly just boosted. And then we have some of the Scandinavian countries like Norway, who is not even visible on this figure. Iceland is in green here, and around 20%. What happened after this figure? If we look at Norway from 2009 to 2013, it is clearly growing, and it's growing quite a lot. But before 2009, I don't think the Norwegian official statistics even registered released salmon. Then we were ordered by the ICES and NOSC to start to at least report released salmon, and from 2009 we have quite okay official statistics. So in 2009, 7% of the total registered catch was released, and in 2013 that had increased by more than, or around 10,000 fish, to 15% of the total. But when we go in and look at the different rivers, we see a huge difference in between rivers, and also between beats on different rivers. So, like the River Lærdal, a formerly very famous salmon river in Norway, where salmon are now recovering from a parasite. The anglers were obliged to put back whole fish, so there it was 100%. Two of the most famous and best producing salmon rivers in Norway lately, the Gaula and the Orkla in the middle of Norway. They had last year actually a release rate close to 40%, which is a huge increase from almost nothing to 40% just over a 5-year period, essentially. Other rivers are extremely low, still, like the Tana River, which we share with Finland. I'm coming back to that. But also the river Namsen, which is another famous salmon river in the middle of Norway, close to the Gaula and Orkla. And this reflects differences in angler and river owner mentality, differences in regulations, and yeah. So when it comes to catch and release on Atlantic salmon, we have heard about different species, and catch and release is picking up on many species. Atlantic salmon and catch and release is probably the best studied, at least of freshwater species. And it's no doubt that it works. It works extremely well in terms of survival. I'm not going to go into much detail here, but at least 30 quite good refereed international publications are looked specifically at salmon. And these are some of my colleagues in Nina working with experiments in the River Alta. Very, very, very fun research to do, fishing in the world's most expensive salmon river in research. And this is typical research that most of you are familiar with, radio tagging the fish and following it. And I think that two of the main concerns on the effects of salmon have been mortality under high temperatures and also behavioral effects. My colleague Eva Torstad, who is sort of Nina's expert on catch and release, she has just completed a study down in southern Norway with studying catch and release under higher temperatures, and the mortality is still very low in that study. Catch and release works, and in Alta we have a hydro dam in the upper part of the river who has affected the upper part of this river, and there has been a lack of spawners in that part of the river. Not in the other parts of the river. And because of these problems, which were observed quite early, they started to introduce 100% catch and release on that part of the river. And the number this is number of spawning reds, which you can see has increased tremendously after the introduction of catch and release in the Alta River. So then it's easy to ask the question, and sometimes when you discuss with people who are sort of very eager salmon anglers, you sometimes get the feeling that catch and release is the answer to everything in salmon conservation. But like we know, it's much more than that to salmon conservation. Atlantic salmon is on a downward decline in around North Atlantic, as we heard about also yesterday. And there is a range of challenges that are contributing to this decline. It's the fish farms, it's harvesting. Some places there are parasites and diseases. This is the picture of the Gyrodactylus parasite, which some of you might have heard of. In Norway and also in Canada, we have problems with acidification of rivers. And for some of these challenges, catch and release might be a measure that reduces or helps. But for some of these other challenges, there are quite other measures that must be taken. And I think that is important for people like us who are sort of advocating catch and release, that we try to balance this message, and that we don't go too far. I think I think that if you look at Norwegian cases, you will find some quite contrasting and interesting observations. Of course we know that we need a diagnosis for each river. This is a river in southern Norway, River Mondal. This is a river where salmon went extinct quite early in the 1900s actually. There's a very acid rock face in this part of the country. So very early on after industrialization, acidification became a problem, and the salmon went extinct very early. For many decades, people didn't know that it was acidification, so people really didn't understand why they disappeared. But they disappeared, and in the 60s and 70s, when we got this new knowledge, it was clear that this was about acidification. In this river, there's been a full-scale, continuous river liming program from 1997. And the first years there was a stocking program in addition, but only for the first couple of years with a nearby stock. And this river has had a tremendous development since the liming started in 1997, and we have had catches up to 15 tons of salmon in that river annually. It has been a little bit poor the later years, but that's probably due to hydropower impacts or oceanic survival. But nevertheless, this story shows that it's absolutely possible to recover a salmon population without any catch and release whatsoever. Because here it's very, very low catch and release. Maybe it's picked up a little bit the last few years, but it's still quite low, I think. So that's one example. Then we have another example which I wanted to talk a little bit about since we're here today in Finland. And that's the river Tana, which is the Norwegian name, or Teno as it's called in Finland. This is a shared river between Norway and Finland. It's probably, together with the Miramichi in Canada, it's the most important or most productive salmon river system in the world. The catches in this river system, if you also include the catches in the sea, if you go back 50 years in times, it has probably been as high as 600 tons per year. And that's very high for a river with Atlantic salmon. This river lies up in the far north, and there is very, very few threats to the salmon on this river. No hydropower, no pollution, no fish farming, no disease, no parasite, whatever. This river is seriously overharvested, and it now produces less than 10–15% of what it should produce. The spawning targets are only reached by 15 to 20%. And in my opinion, I think it's a disgrace both for Norway and Finland that this river is managed so poorly. This is a situation where reduced harvest would have an extremely large impact. So what explains growth in catch and release? Well, I'm doing some studies now on, I'm a social scientist mostly, so we have done some studies now looking into social norms. That means what is considered appropriate pushes behavior very fast. And I can send you some papers on that if you're interested in learning more about that. But the interplay between management recreations and social norms are extremely important. Atlantic salmon conservation is far more than catch and release. Catch and release or reduced harvest might mitigate impacts from, for instance, farm escapees and poor ocean survival. And catch and release gives more resilient wild salmon stocks and protecting opportunities. But on the other hand, catch and release can never save Atlantic salmon. And we must also avoid to get into what I call the ugly sides of catch and release, turning it into a religion and pushing away angling segments that actually want to, and some places actually can harvest salmon sustainably. Yeah, thank you.
I was asking one Finnish researcher, Esa Sturhamar, I don't know if you know him. He has made a good survey on the economic value of river on commercial fishing and recreational fishing. I will send it to you. But basically the result was that it's 10 euros per kilogram for commercial salmon catch and 90 euros per kilogram for recreational salmon. So 9 times more, and it could be even more, but at least 9 times more. And the value of commercial salmon fishing for the salmon population of River Florida was 2 million euros, and the recreational value was 5.1 million. And yeah, that kind of results. Just wanted to share.
About the population of this Mandal River, is it a new population? Is self-supporting, no more stocking?
Yeah, right.
So now it's naturally spawning.
It was taken from a nearby river where the salmon has
Naturally
survived.
spawning, so
Yeah.
no stocking.
No stocking now, no. Only the first years.
My question is about trolling for the salmon and CNR on this. We've heard several times here with the socioeconomic value that boat fishing brings up this value, and one of the debates that's been going on in Denmark and Sweden is the trolling fishermen and these trolling competitions, and them taking a lot of the salmon out of the population. And in general, it's a good thing for fishermen to stand together, but there's been some debates between people who fish in the rivers who think the trolling fishermen are taking too many, and some of the trolling fishermen have put their own bag limits on 2 fish, and others are coming in with taking photos with 10. So there's a growing CNR in this. Have you sort of looked into how, one thing is how the discussion is in the media, but how big is the actual effect from trolling fishing, fish being removed from the population?
Trolling fishing for salmon is sort of a black hole in Norwegian. We know quite little about it. Some of you might compliment me on this, but we have tried to do some studies. We think that fishing for Atlantic salmon in the sea in Norway is probably been reduced very, very much. It was significant probably in the 60s and 70s, but every sign, we don't really have good empirical data on this because it's so hard to sample. We have tried to do some pilot studies going out into harbors like in the Trondheim fjord where there's supposed to come or where it's coming in tens of thousands of salmon each summer, and we really don't find any trolling fishes there anymore.
That's true.
So, yeah.
Trolling, the way we know it from Sweden, Denmark and also Germany, is forbidden in Norway. There's a limit of 2 fishing rods per boat when you're fishing for salmon. So you're not allowed, this trolling with 8 or 10 fishing rods is not possible at all.
Okay. That's another good point. The regulations has reduced, especially this very technified type you have in the Baltics. I think that was already
I have 2 comments. Biology and economics. I think maybe you underestimate that we are now talking today, we're talking about the stocks of the river that are so low. I think last year, probably historic low catches in Norway, historic low catches in Scotland, maybe even on the Kola Peninsula. And so we shouldn't be worried. I mean, we should be really worried that there is not enough spawning stock in the river. And I have never seen a river with too many spawning stock.
No, but I think I can give you many examples from Norway with rivers. Despite the overall picture, I completely agree with you. But still in Norway we have rivers with very, very large spawning stocks, despite also significant harvests. So I think that this is, I think it's just about sort of moving right.
Okay, my other comment is economics. Actually, you didn't mention that, the economics. And if you get, like we do, we get $1,000 for this cost. I mean, that means that we get $2,000 or $3,000 for this cost. And the economics, then we get much more income from the whole river if you practice catch and release on the world market. And that the extra income can do much more to get even, further habitat improvement and so on. Very important.